Hello there, welcome to another episode of Matt's Chats. This is a series of short videos where I sit and talk to people in and around the whisky industry to try and bring it to life a little bit more for you. And I'm delighted to be here today with Billy Walker, who is the Master Distiller, owner,
Blender
of Glenallachie in Speyside, the great distillery in Speyside. And thank you for having me and talking to me, Billy.
Pleasure.
And could you sort of tell, for people that maybe aren't aware of Glenallachie as a distillery or as a single malt whisky, can you sort of describe a little bit about, the distillery and the style?
Interesting question, and one of the very interesting things about the history of most distilleries, but if we focus on Glenallachie, it was a distillery that had operated under the radar. It wasn't perceived as being the previous owners used it really as a workhorse, and they wanted to use it in a blended capacity. And when we got the opportunity to acquire it, I knew Glenallachie as a style of malt whisky. I actually used it a lot in blended whisky. So when the opportunity to actually acquire the distillery became available, exciting. But you're buying somebody else's history in a way, and then you have to. When we were in a position and we had actually acquired the distillery, we then had to define who we wanted it to be, the DNA, the personality of the whisky we wanted to be going forward, both in terms of managing the mature inventory that we acquired and also the new spirit that we were making. And these were two quite different challenges. The first important one really was understanding the personality and the nature and the depth of the inventory that we'd acquired, and the kind of things that we wanted to do in terms of wood management. It was always in our mind that we wanted to impose a sherry style on both the mature whisky and indeed the new whisky that we were producing going forward.
Is that something that had happened historically with the distillery, or is that simply the direction that you...
Well, essentially it was the direction we wanted to go in. Some of the casks were accommodated our desire. Some of them we had to work hard to move them out of American barrels into a variety of sherry styles, specifically and most importantly PX and Oloroso. And that journey was quite a challenging journey, quite a demanding. In fact, in truth, it's taking me, I think, until today, 7 years, to get to the point where we believe we have achieved the kind of inventory management status that we want, and that will deliver the kind of personality that we have created for Glenallachie. The new fill part was much more easy to do because, cutting right to the heart of what the balance, the equilibrium between making a style of new fill spirit that's going to live in some very rich wood. You have to make sure that one doesn't overwhelm the other. And I think we've actually achieved that kind of equilibrium that we're looking for. So 7 years on, in many ways, I think a lot of the journey is done for me. I'm very comfortable where the inventory is now going forward. Very happy with what we have in bottle now. We've created. We have showcased Glenallachie, whereas 10 years ago it was unknown, and I suppose you
couldn't see a bottle of it.
No, indeed you wouldn't, and but there's lots of reasons why that would be the case, and we can maybe come back to that question. But where we are with Glenallachie is comfortable, and maybe better than comfortable. We're very happy with the old mature inventory that we have now remanaged into the style of wood that we want to see evolving, and comfortable with how we are managing the new fill and the style of wood. So we have defined the personality. I think we've said on a number of occasions that the great thing about being a private independent distiller is that there are no constraints. We're we're not constrained by having a long-term, historically powerful, well-known brand. In that kind of context,
You can dictate it.
you know, we're not driven by consistency. We're driven by perfection.
Mm.
So we are dictating the journey we're on, and we are striving. And I think we've probably achieved 90% of where we want to be. The last 10% is probably the most difficult 10%, but that's the journey we're on now.
Yeah. And speaking of this sort of journey, you've been in the whiskey industry just over 50 years now. Can you kind of give us a little sort of, in a nutshell, sort of how you got started and how it's kind of evolved to the point where you are today?
I suppose in many ways it's easy to understand how I got involved. I was brought up, born indeed, and brought up in a whisky town of Dumbarton, which was the spiritual home of Hiram Walker Ballantynes. And indeed, in surrounding areas, there was Little Mill, there was Loch Lomond, there was McGavigan's, there was Newton Bond. But Ballantynes was a big player in the town. And I had been studying at university, doing a degree in chemistry. And for a while I had spent about 4 or 5 years as a pharmaceutical research chemist. But the kind of draw to get into the whisky industry was quite strong. And I was invited by the then managing director to come on, I'd like you to join us. And it was a great time. I mean, the industry was dominated, in these days the industry was dominated by blended whisky. Ballantynes had some, in my opinion, they had the best, absolutely the best grain whisky ever available in the Barton grain. But we also had some wonderful malts. We had Tormore, we had Glenburgie, Milton Duff. These days I think we still did with Scapa. And locally we made Lomond and Inverleven. So it's a really, really exciting time. And it was also a time when the company gave me such wonderfully expansive opportunity to be involved in everything. Probably the best 5-6 years of a wonderful 5-6 years of being in the industry, working with and beside the great Jack Gowdy, who was maybe one of the greatest blenders that ever existed.
And how did that kind of develop to, you know, you've previously owned distilleries, you now own Glenallachie. How did that sort of side of it?
Well, that journey was quite, it was an interesting journey because I probably hadn't gone as far as I could at Hiram Walker Ballantynes. And surprisingly, I went to work with Beecham's fermenting penicillin for a while.
Oh, right.
And I have to say that was a much more challenging fermentation style. But it didn't interest me enough. And Inverhouse Distillers asked me if I would come along and be their blender. And I was there for 7 years. That was a great period. They were exciting beyond belief. They had Garnheath grain. And we had our own malt distillery on site. We produced Inverleven, we produced Glenmavis, just a whole variety of single malts. American company, they had great vision, and they didn't see any barriers to doing things. But after, I think I was there maybe 6-7 years, I got an opportunity to join Terry Hillman at Burns Stewart. A very small company, essentially a blending house. Different kind of challenge, but a very interesting challenge. And I suppose that was a pivotal moment for me because eventually we acquired the company and then opened up opportunities to buy Deanston Distillery, rehabilitate it, resuscitate it, bring it back to life. Tobermory similarly. And then that journey ended because we were acquired by Angostura, and at that point it was the right time for me to leave. But I had some money then, and it's around about 2003, 2004. Very, very interesting time in the industry. I had a good working relationship with Chivas, and I approached him about buying a distillery, and essentially it was, what would you like?
What, literally from
yes.
the... Well, probably apart from Glenlivet or something.
Of course.
Like that.
There was something like, generally across the industry, there was something like maybe 15, 16 distilleries mothballed. So we had a look at Ben Riach, we had a look at one or two others, and Ben Riach fitted the kind of plan that we had. Interesting inventory, and it was start of a very exciting journey, because suddenly we were in control. We could create things. We could do thinking a little bit outside the box, but not outside of what the SWA would define. And we started looking at some very exciting varietals of wood, and then
things that were quite unorthodox at the time.
Different, surprising. Virgin oak wood, some different styles of sherry, and then we got a call from Chivas to say, "Would you like to buy Glenallachie?" And I mean, that was an amazing moment, because Glenallachie indeed was one of the distilleries we had previously had at Ballantyne's Highland Walker when they acquired Teachers. It was one of the very first distilleries to focus on sherry casks. So when that was consummated, we had, of course, spent a lot of time examining and looking at the inventory, seeing the personality that we wanted to create. They drifted a little bit from the kind of focus on sherry casks, but there was a lot of sherry casks in the inventory, and so we worked. Again, we were working both in terms of understanding who we wanted to be and creating the kind of backdrop of the inventory and the cask management that we could create who we wanted to be. And I think in hindsight, I would say that the team, not just me, the team did a really good job on Glenallachie. And briefly, in the final stage of that particular business ownership, we acquired Glenallachie, a wonderful location, a complicated distillery, I have to say, but wonderful location. And again,
stunning place.
Stunning.
Yeah,
I mean, it's almost. I remember saying to myself, "You can't buy this." Well, actually, you can. But it was owned by Russians who were a little bit impatient, and so we bought it in 2016. Yes. We did a lot of work on it. It was terrific spirit to work with. And again, we looked at a whole variety of the casks, what works with this, some wine casks, some sherry casks, some virgin oak casks. And one of the big disappointments for me when we sold the business was that we never really were able to showcase Glenallachie in the way we wanted to. And I'm pretty sure that
is that just because of the timing?
The timing.
Obviously,
there was things we did with. We used some. We used some wonderful sherry casks from the Crimea, and sherry in parenthesis from the Crimea, and these casks were just, and they're still to be presented to the consumer. So it was a sad day when Brown Foreman came calling, and but it was
a tough decision.
Oh, for me, hugely tough. It was the right decision. I had two partners, South African guys who were wonderful partners, and it was important for them for that to be consummated, that deal. For me, there was unfinished business, and it kind of when we had finalised the deal, a bit of sadness because there was more to be done. But actually, out of the blue, I got a call from the MD of Chivas asking, "Would you like to buy Glenallachie?" And I said, "Look."
So almost sort of going back that sort of 12, 15 years or whatever.
Unfinished business, and as I said earlier, I knew the strengths of Glenallachie. I knew the style of the whisky. It had never been showcased, and that's really important for us because we don't want it to have been in multiple retailers. We want a blank sheet to start painting our own pictures. And there's a lot of work to do. We inherited a lot of inventory, and some very, very good inventory and some very nice casks. But it wasn't who we wanted it to be. We needed to re-engineer.
So like you said, sort of at the beginning,
Yeah.
it leads us on quite nicely, because we're actually here today for the launch of the Glenallachie 35, which I believe is the oldest. It's the oldest expression that you've released so far.
It won't be the oldest we released, because there will be a 50-year-old.
But to date.
To date.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's fantastic to work with old whiskey. Challenge sometimes, but understanding the history of the wood management, the expectation, the building blocks that you expect, that you've inherited, like these were fresh American barrels, so you know you're going to get oodles of honey, butterscotch, vanilla. That's a given. What we want to do, though, was to re-engineer it into the kind of sherry dimension, and we very quickly we put it into some PX casks, some Oro casks, and some virgin casks, and we've monitored the development.
So you identified it sort of fairly early on within your inventory.
Important. Virtually within the first 2 or 3 months, we need to work on this. There is a plan here that we need to create something that carries its own depth and personality. And with old whiskey, there's always some uncertainty. I mean, personally, I'm a huge believer in age matters, but you also have to tease the maturation process along. So we put it into almost 50-50 PX and Oloroso casks with some American virgin oak. So you know, the expectation is that the PX is going to bring along the sweetness, the kind of rich sherry notes, the Christmas cake notes. The Oloroso is going to give you the raisins, it's going to give you malt, it's going to give you coffee, and the virgin oak will give you vanilla, another injection of vanilla and honey on top of historically what was already there. So what we're going to taste tonight, I'm
looking forward to it very much. We've got the bottle here actually. Can you just sort of show it to us? It looks very, very impressive here. Just sort of see. The light's not great in here, but we can just sort of hold it up there for people to see. So yeah, very, very, very nice looking sort of packaging and the case there. But yeah, I'm very much looking forward to.
You won't listen. You won't be disappointed. This is special, and all the building blocks that we have engineered into the mix have played such an important part. Yeah, well, listen, I'm actually quite proud of this one.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Billy, for spending the time and talking to me, you know, about this. Very excited to try it. So I think we should probably get on and do that, shouldn't we? But thank you very much, Billy.
Seems a good idea.
Yeah. Cheers. Thank you.